A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, when nobody else cares, one person, nay, trooper, will celebrate more than a decade of Star Wars, The Force Unleashed.
Hello there, Axelmyth here, and today I'm going to be taking a look at my favorite game series of all time, Star Wars The Force Unleashed. Except I won't be taking a look at just one of the versions of the series. No. I actually kind of like hating myself, I guess. So I'm going to actually take a look at all of the different versions and what they have to offer in terms of differences. I won't be looking at a version of the game if it's like the same. So like I won't be looking at the PS3 version because the same thing as 360. Same thing goes with the PS2 version. Although I really want to play the PS2 version, but the Wii version is just a little more important down the road. Damn it. It's also important to note here that I played the Wii version first. I knew of the 360 version on the other side of the fence, and it's even the reason why I wanted a 360 to begin with. It just looks so much better than the Wii version, right? I was able to play it at like friends and neighbors' house, and having that comparison in my head just left me feeling like I missed out on this amazing experience, a better experience. I wanted a piece of that next genness. We didn't get a 360 until 2009-2010, but once we did, I never looked back. And having said that now, I wanted to start with the Wii version first. But as I was writing this review, I kind of just realized that a lot of the comparisons I wanted to make aren't even in the 360 version. So I just kind of thought it would have been just smart to start from the base and then review the add-ons later. Now, getting into this game.
Guys, what if Luke Skywalker turned to the dark side? Then everybody nodded their heads in agreement or something, and after 6 months of chanting kick-ass with the Force Unleashed was born. This game is pretty much a Star Wars hack and slash with some RPG elements, but there are a bunch of different Force powers you have in your hands here, making this game stand out from other games like it at the time. You have Force Lightning, which is pretty useful. Not super powerful, especially at first, but it's good to stop some of the bigger enemies from bullying you. You have the Force Shield, which doesn't last really long, even when it's charged, and I feel like it's only really useful when there's not a bunch of enemies on screen shooting at you from all different directions, because you have to charge it. It only protects you for so long, and the window is just so short. It's not worth using much. But hey, when you swing your saber, it does stun enemies, as it's made of Force Lightning. Later on, you have Force Repulse. This one is a bit more challenging to use in combat. Like the shield, you have to charge it, and for it to do any damage, your enemies have to be pretty close by. Then when you let go of the button, it lets out a giant BOOM! But when there's not many enemies near you, it's not very satisfying. Then you have your typical saber throw and force push. But let me tell you, the force push is so much fun to use here. And damn that sound effect. Like boom, boom, boom! Hey, wait a second. Last but certainly not least, we have the Force Grapple. This is my preferred style of fighting. This ability is just amazing. You pick up your enemies and swing them around, roll them around the floor, or screw it, the ceiling. And they also interact with the environment, so when you get them close to another enemy, they'll grab onto them, and you can pick up 2 of them. Then toss them aside like yesterday's iPhone. I literally cannot get over this ability. The doll physics these guys have is just the icing on top. I did mention that this game had RPG elements. The more enemies you kill, which is pretty much everyone, the more force points you gain, and at some point you level up. I'm not really sure what triggers this. There's not really anything that tells you how many force points until the next level. Leveling up will give you force orbs for different abilities. One is for force powers. This increases the strength of the force powers you possess, and I think it also sucks up less force energy as well. I'm not entirely sure on that one. The next is leveling up Starkiller himself, taking less damage, doing more damage, health, and I think, again, using less force energy, just stuff like that. The last is different combos you can do. Pretty useful, and it makes the lightsaber combat a bit better, as I do feel like the saber combat is the weakest part of the game. One of the combos is actually mandatory for completion though. All of that just makes the game super fun, and with the way the game tells its story, it sort of feels like a realistic looking version of a Tartakovsky Star Wars Clone Wars, where everyone is so overpowered, it's just ridiculous, but it's so awesome at the same time. But what is the story, you may ask? This is a decade-old game, so I don't feel bad about spoilers at all. It starts out about a year or two after the events in Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. Vader's on the hunt for some Jedi, and there's one on the Wookiee homeworld of Kashyyyk. This is pretty much the tutorial level of the game, trying to figure out the controls and most of the Force abilities, as the more machine than man cannot use Force lightning. Seems pretty right to me. After beating said Jedi, Vader remarks how he senses somebody more powerful nearby, and then finds a boy, the Jedi's son. After killing some stormtroopers to protect the boy, Vader takes him in and trains him in the ways of the dark side. About a decade later, Starkiller is pretty much finishing what Darth Vader started. His job is pretty much to hunt down remaining Jedi in preparation to assist Vader to destroy the Emperor. He meets up with his companion droid Proxy, a shape-shifting droid whose sole purpose is to kill Starkiller. He ends up being so endearing, he talks to Starkiller like a best friend, but then casually mentions that he'll kill him, or Proxy just flat out apologizing for not offing him this time. He also meets his 8th pilot, Juno Eclipse, and right off the bat we can tell he has kind of a crush on her. He asks Proxy for some background detail on her, much like a child in a playground would, like, shh, don't tell her I like her. The trio are sent to find a Jedi named Rom Koda, a Jedi who survived Order 66 because he didn't have anything to do with the clone army. This is technically the first level, but personally I always count Kashyyyk as level 1, because there's literally a tutorial inside the menus of this game. You don't start out with very much, pretty much just force push, grapple, and lightning. This is also where we're introduced to holocrons, but I'll talk about those later. At the end of every stage, there's some sort of boss battle. This stage is Rom Koda himself, and this is the easiest boss in the game. After Starkiller defeats Koda, he tells Starkiller that Vader will not always be his master. He senses only himself in the Sith's future. Then we're sent to Raxus Prime to defeat Kazdan Barabbas, an ex-Jedi who's very crazy. This dude literally made a full-size replica of the Jedi Temple out of trash. It's not that important to the overall plot, but this game sort of starts out as mini-adventures to get you used to the controls and stuff. Vader is still not impressed and sends Starkiller out to find one more Jedi. Jedi Master Shak-Ti on Felucia. Shak-Ti and her apprentice Maris Brood feel the dark presence of the antagonist that we're playing, and Shak-Ti sends her apprentice off to fight another day, as the Sith approaches. They fight until the death when Shak-Ti tells him that the Sith will always betray one another, and thinks he will find out soon enough. She falls backwards, leaving Starkiller bewildered. It cannot be understated how important this interaction is to the entire plot of this game and the characters' motivations. After this, Vader calls Starkiller back, and it's time for them to strike now. Starkiller's finally ready to take on the Emperor. The Emperor enters the room and Vader strikes down Starkiller, mostly only to the shock of Starkiller himself. The Emperor tells Vader to prove his loyalty by disposing of his secret apprentice. Vader complies, sending Starkiller out the window. The Emperor seems to buy this, and Vader sends a droid to pick up his apprentice. An unspecific amount of time later, Starkiller is now in an Imperial medical facility. Apparently another secret one or something. But this one is also heading straight towards a star. Vader informs us of our next mission: find the Emperor's enemies and round them up to create a rebellion. Sounds really dumb on his part. This is where level 5 starts, and despite the fact that there's literally a sun out the window, there's actually no time limit, but we're basically here to save Juno Eclipse and book it out of here. Juno's unaware that Starkiller is still a liege to Vader, and he wants to keep it that way. He thinks learning other methods of the Force is a good idea, and that leads them somehow to Cloud City to Rom Koda again. This time, he's looking really rough and drunk. Apparently Jedi do not take it well to losing their eyesight. It's at this stage you start seeing a particular character who's not even a part of the main plot, but is sort of a reoccurring villain in this game, the Shadow Guard. He's sort of a boss battle when they have no idea who the boss should be. He also works as a mini-boss sometimes. It's just kind of funny. So we recruited Koda as our master, and it's on to gather the Emperor's enemies. Our first stop is Kashyyyk to save Princess Leia from the Empire. They took her because her father, Bail Organa, kept speaking out against the Empire. This is the stage when the game starts getting harder. They already introduced a certain metallic enemy before, but they really stack them on this stage. Then after we rescue Princess Leia, she will help us. If we free the Wookiees. Literally, even Juno's like, can I convince you not to do this? And then we get a modified AT-AT boss battle at the end of the stage. Apparently this dude is a giant sports hunter and is generally a jerk. Very prejudiced against Jedi. After I died to that thing and his minions about 10 times, it's time to finally go find Bail Organa, who went to Felucia after Kodo refused to help him get his daughter back from the Empire. Dude's blind. What's he gonna do? To the game dev's credit, even though it's supposed to be around the same area as level 4, Felucia's totally different stage this time around. The level design's different, even the aesthetics have changed, and it all seems a tad bit darker. The boss in this stage is Barriss Brood, Shak-Ti's apprentice from earlier. She's corrupted by the dark side of this place and starts going a bit crazy, but after defeating her, she promises to leave and never come back, never to be seen in another piece of Star Wars media again. That I know of, at least. Bail drops an Anakin reference, and he makes a plan with Kodo and Starkiller. Bail is supposed to go get other senators who hate the Empire, and we're supposed to go make a major strike against the Empire. Starkiller contacts Vader for guidance on this one, and that's when Juno figures out this entire thing. She's not too happy about it either, and they have a little lover spat.
Please, don't make me leave another life behind.
Now it's time to go back to Raxus Prime for the semi-final stage. As before, this stage is also different and is actually pretty challenging. The important story element in this one is Proxy noticing his chance tries to kill you and acts as the stage's boss. It's a really neat sort of boss rush where you also fight him as Darth Maul and some of the other Jedi that you've already fought. I honestly didn't find this boss too hard, but it was still pretty cool. But the most notable thing about this stage is after you beat the boss, the stage goes on for a bit longer. This is also a stage where the super iconic Star Destroyer scene is. So cool. And now the time has come. All of the Emperor's enemies have been brought to one place, and it's time for an alliance. One that will be known throughout the ages. That is until Vader comes, messes everything up, kidnapping all the senators, Kodo, and almost killing Starkiller again. This time Juno saves him, and Starkiller realizes that he's been duped. This was Vader and the Emperor's plan all along. After a bit of Jedi meditating, he sees a vision of a space station out in the middle of nowhere. The Death Star. When I was younger, this was my favorite stage, mostly because of the giant open area at the end. As an adult, this is still my favorite stage, but I think it has more to do with the stage look itself than anything else. Like the rest of the game, it's really linear, and nothing super noteworthy happens during the stage story-wise. We make it and have to deal with a few guards before finally entering the hallway to the Emperor's chamber, where we have a final face-off with Darth Vader. As a kid, I remember this battle being more aggressive, but I was surprised to find out that it's actually not too bad. After this little skirmish and slamming Vader around, you throw him through the door, and after the best line in the game,
"You will give me the names of your friends and allies, and then you will die."
it's on to make your final decision. Kill Darth Vader or save your friends. This is the culmination of what you've been building up to. Kill the Emperor or kill your master. If you go for the Emperor, you have a relatively easy boss match because they keep throwing Imperial guards at you. But still can be challenging because the Emperor hits like a truck. But once you defeat him, Starkiller sacrifices himself for his allies, and they escape to fight another day and form the Rebel Alliance, with your friends Juno and Kodo mourning his loss but remembering the person he was past the darkness that he grew up in. We also find out that bringing all the Emperor's enemies together was the plan all along, meaning Vader's secret apprentice wasn't so secret. However, if you decide to fulfill your vengeance and defeat Vader, you're met with a decently challenged battle. This final fight with the damaged Sith Lord will see the end of Vader himself, with you aligning yourself to the Emperor for a second, only to betray him at the last moment. But you have failed. The Emperor has killed the rebel leaders and your friends, and now you are under his control to do as he wishes, until he can replace you. Such a chilling bad ending, but leads to some very awesome what-if DLC. Though, unfortunately, I will not be talking about those. But I will probably talk about one of them in the next review.
It's about a guy who's raised in darkness, who gets redeemed at the end, sacrificing himself for the entire galaxy for a peace he will never know. I just love these characters, and it really helps that the voice acting is just top-notch in this game.
Coda is sort of like, bringing it into a modern terms, Luke Skywalker from TLJ, and it's really good here. By the end, you feel the connection him and Starkiller have, but only because the way they talk to each other and seem to have respect for one another. One fault of this story is that I don't think there's enough training sequences where Coda trains Starkiller in the ways of the Jedi. Juno is a decent enough character. I always like how she reacts to finding out that we're low-key still working for Darth Vader. I'd have really liked to see her get a bit more of a character arc, though. She seems like just a love interest for the main character. That's not to say their chemistry doesn't work here, but I do wish they did a little more with her. Starkiller is a blank slate pretty much. His character arc is a really cool one, though not really original these days. For its time, it was awesome to see this bad guy with a heart of gold. Though, it's not without its faults. I do think they could have gone a little deeper into his character and his psychology. And then there's Darth Vader. I won't say this develops Darth Vader's character in any way, because it doesn't. But I do like how they executed his character. Pun not intended. Seriously, what really makes this game's story work can be summed up in what Shak-Ti said. The Sith always betray one another. You don't know whether or not Vader will betray Starkiller, the one he raised from childhood, or the Emperor, his former surrogate father figure.
Vader had me convinced as a 12-year-old boy that he was actually doing this to kill the Emperor and take his place. Even knowing how the story was going to end. That's how good this was.
Once you defeat the game and start a new one, the cutscene will play from the first level as normal, but during gameplay you are given new costumes for beating the game. For the light side, there's some cool looking Jedi robes that apparently are supposed to be some sort of Force Ghost costume, and then the Sith outfit from the dark side ending. Both look really cool, but unfortunately the costumes don't give you any upgrades or benefits, purely for appearance. Which does sort of stink, but I do get it. That mechanic is placed elsewhere. I have somehow gotten this far into the review without mentioning gameplay somehow. As I mentioned before, this is a hack and slash beat 'em up with some platforming. The stage design isn't too terrible. I did notice a few times where I ran into invisible walls that look like wide open areas. I feel like it's also worth mentioning the game isn't perfect. I did notice a few glitches, like this enemy literally hit me through the floor, and then I spent what felt like 10 minutes trying to get out, doing a bunch of different combos of buttons, and it just wouldn't budge. I literally had to reset. As for the hack and slash part, I will fully admit I'm not this type of gamer. I usually find beat 'em ups boring, pretty much mashing one or two buttons, and that pretty much gets the job done. Which is why I said I felt like the lightsaber combat is pretty much the weakest aspect of the gameplay. I know it can get in depth, but I'm just not any good at it, and I've given it a chance, but I've never gotten the hang of accurately doing combos and the like. I much prefer the combat style of Jedi Fallen Order, but I'm not sure how well that would integrate into this game. But that's okay, because you still have all those Force abilities. The enemy types are vast, especially later on, but then it dials it back down to different variants of stormtroopers. And then there are these bastards. I'm serious. These droid-looking stormtroopers gave me so much trouble. You can't use your force grab powers on them for some reason, nor will the force push work for diddly crap. Only your lightning really works, but it doesn't drain their health either, so you still have to get close to them. Which wouldn't be a problem, except they have this undefendable grabbing move that ends up draining a bunch of health. It's not like you can take a second and run away either, because they have these missiles that lock onto you. I've tried occupying them by throwing objects for them as a surprise attack, but locking onto them from far away is a crapshoot. These droids are the bane of my existence, and Rise of Skywalker exists.
Anyway,
In each stage, you find these box-shaped objects known as holocrons. There are usually about 15 of them a stage, but some smaller stages actually only have 5. Each of them will carry force orbs to upgrade your stats, lightsaber crystals to change the color and style of your blade, unstable, compressed, and normal. One of them looks like a flaming sword, and the other one pulses up and down the blade. Both are pretty neat effects, but again, it's only really for looks. I will say it's nice that they have so many colors. And then there's the Darksaber. Dude, if you want to go total edgelord. You can also find assist kyber crystals. These are things that give you different benefits, and it's really cool depending on your play style. Like if you're really good at combos, you use one that deals more damage. You use the force an awful lot, well, there's even one that uses less of your force gauge. And only 2 holocrons in this game will have extra costumes for Starkiller. Speaking of which, there are a bunch of hidden costumes in this game. Behind the menus, there's a password screen. These were the days the developers would put these in here. So painstakingly type in the password Sandan, and you have over 32 costumes, including Coda, the Emperor, and just like a bunch of stormtroopers. Like, I know this is only for aesthetics, but I love the fact that you can be a stormtrooper beating the hell out of other stormtroopers. Though usually when you are any other costume, namely a character that actually appears in the story, it won't play cutscenes. Though, that may be a good thing upon replays, because the game doesn't let you skip them at first. It makes sure you at least have some clue as to what is going on in the story. Then it will let you skip. Like, thanks, but I know what I'm doing after I've beaten the game, game! In this version, the cutscenes are pre-rendered, which does make them look good for their time. But it does make it so that whenever you do have a different outfit on, Starkiller will magically be back into the attire he's supposed to be in for that scene. Which is just pretty goofy. The graphics are something I will say have aged poorly. In particular, their mouth movements are just so unnatural and stiff, and most of their walking animations are just super awkward. They went for a more realistic look because that was just the thing to do back then. Though I do feel like most of the textures in the game aren't that bad. Probably the part of the game that's aged best graphics-wise, if I'm being honest. But I do think this game could have aged a bit better had they gone with that 2003 Clone Wars art style. But then again, I wonder if this game would have sold nearly as well had it looked like that. Would it have made the game too childish? I guess who knows. Above all, I'd say this game looked amazing for its time, but just hasn't aged well like many realistic-looking games at the time. One general consensus complaint is that this game is just too short, and I totally agree with that. This game starts feeling like it's just getting going, and then before you know it, you're at the final stage at that final battle with Darth Vader, and it's just like, this game probably could have been another couple levels more.
do I recommend this game for a modern audience? I think yes is in order here. It's not the absolute best game you will ever play in your life, but it's not the absolute worst either. This game is very important to me, and it helped shape the Star Wars fan I am today. So I am a bit biased, but just as Shadows of the Empire shaped a generation of its time, I really feel like this game did the same. This was my Shadows of the Empire. I do hope you'll consider blasting that subscribe button and igniting that bell icon to keep up to date with future parts of this series. And let me know what you think about this game in the comment section down below. This has been Axelmyth, and I'll catch you next time. Hey guys, Axelmyth here today, and today we're going to be looking at the Wii version of Star Wars The Force Unleashed, as promised. This is the second part of the series, so I highly recommend you watch the first part, as I'm gonna kind of assume that you've already seen the previous part, mostly because I don't want to repeat myself too much here. This is far from my first Star Wars experience, but it is the one that impacted me most as a kid. This and Lego Star Wars, obviously, but as I said last time, once I got a 360, I never looked back, and I always really wondered why that was. So that's kind of why we're here today. So I already talked about the stories and the characters last time, so I'm not going to go too much into detail like I said. This time I mostly wanted to focus on the differences the Wii and the 360 version have, and just kind of like the impact that some of those story changes have on the initial story that was told in the 360.
So we open up about the same, except it's nighttime here. I'm not sure why such a small change, but honestly it looks pretty nice. I'd even say it looks better at nighttime. The next big change, story-wise, is after we defeat Ram Koda, Darth Vader sends us to the Jedi Temple on Coruscant for a skill test. Here we fight an Utapau Sith Lord from 1,000 years ago named Darth Desolus. Or Desolous if you're dyslexic. After that, on Raxus Prime, there's a minor character who becomes sort of a mini-boss. He's a Rhodian character. Not sure what that's about, but it's a pretty cool design anyway. The funny thing is, most of the major changes stage-wise is going to the Jedi Temple after a few stages. You go there a second time after defeating Kaz Din Barabbas. Pretty much the same stage, but later you take a different route. This time, you meet a shape-shifting Sith Lord named Darth Phobos. Please correct me if I said that wrong. All these stops to the Jedi Temple I do feel like enhance the storyline a little bit. They probably don't tell us anything we don't already know, but they are some cool elements that tie into the decision at the end of the game. This time after Vader tries to kill you, you don't play through his entire flagship. It's all one long cutscene. Again, not really sure why that is. There are 13 stages in this game, and I don't know why it would have killed them to add one more. Not a big thing, but it was one of the smaller reasons I wanted to have the 360 version. Right after that, we get a location switch. This was something I knew I was going to bring up. So in the last review, I was questioning how Koda got to the Cloud City. This time, I feel like the Wii version fixes this problem, with the planet being Nar Shaddaa, the planet where you met him the first time. Again, in the long run, it probably doesn't really matter, but the Wii version always made more sense for this part of the story. Before running out into the galaxy collecting senators and such, we take one more break back at the Jedi Temple. Seriously, you'd think this would be enough. Again, same stage that goes into a different route, except this time, we don't fight a Sith Lord at the end. We fight an apparition of Starkiller's father. I mean, every Sith Lord we've met here has been an apparition. Anyway, this is something else I really wanted to talk about. This particular stage eventually became DLC for other versions of the game. The difference is here, instead of fighting your father like some sort of Shakespearean play, in the DLC alternative, it's a fight against the mirror where Starkiller fights the Sith version of himself. I think both versions equally deepen Starkiller's character in their own ways. I like the symbolism more than the stage itself though. Again, I've not actually played the 360 DLC version. I have seen plenty of it though. So after this, the next actual difference is on Raxus Prime. For some reason, they got rid of the proxy fight. Instead, we fight the Shadow Guard again. Granted, he doesn't show up in this game nearly as much, but still a little disappointing that that plotline doesn't do anything this time around. Actually, come to think about it, there's dialogue in the game, but Proxy never actually tries to kill Starkiller either. Our next major difference is, yet again, another stage. After taking down the ship on Raxus Prime, we get a distress signal from Cloud City. Time to help the Senator Garm Bel Iblis. He's a major player in the Rebellion and the old expanded universe. This is where we meet probably the best character in all of Star Wars, Cleef. Look at him, he's an evil Jar Jar Binks. How could anybody not like this? This game gets a 10 out of 10 just for that. Don't at me. This stage ends with a two-phase fight against a Mandalorian named Chappa, a crime lord who took over Cloud City. After that, again, the game pretty much lines up, no major differences from here. I feel like the additions to this story don't add too much, but it does add to Starkiller himself. Though I'll admit, it makes him seem more like the bad guy.
Hey, if he senses who I am, he's not gonna have the chance to tell anyone.
The regular story by itself makes it obvious the good ending is the actual ending. This is sort of a complaint I have with the Xbox version, but some of the added stuff balances it out by making the decision at the end feel less out of character. It feels more like your decision, but since you are playing a character, I don't know how much sense that makes. Still cool nonetheless. I like the balance this stuff makes, but it does come with its flaws though. There are just too many one-time side characters, and honestly, most of it feels like fluff. Content for content's sake, making the story have this weird sort of flow. The main characters themselves don't change much, but there are some of these voice lines that seem like alternate takes. Like this one I noticed from a long time ago when I was a kid.
As will I.
I thought you were passed out in the cargo hold.
I finally came to.
As will I.
I thought you were passed out in the cargo hold.
I finally came to.
And of course, to account for the extra stages, there are extra lines as well. But I do wonder what happened behind the scenes that we got the alternate takes for what is supposed to be the same scene. Did the Xbox team just not let the Wii team have their voice clips? Were these re-recorded, or did they literally just take alternate takes? That'd be an interesting thing to know. Once again, after you beat the respective endings, you unlock both the Jedi and the Sith costumes for a job well done. The biggest difference in this game from the build we looked at last time is definitely the game design itself. I mean, yeah, it's still a hack and slash Star Wars beat 'em up, but this almost feels like a totally different game. The 360 build focused more on platforming. This one focuses more on the combat, making the stage design overall more bland, by having very few, if any at all, bottomless pits. At least it tries to focus more on combat. More on that later. I end up defeating the enemies much in the same way as before, though with less malicious torture involved because this game is a bit more limited. Though later on, I did find this move I don't think is in the 360 version even. Raising someone in the air and swinging the Wiimote to hurtle nearby enemies to the poor guy. You have most of the same force abilities as before, minus the lightning shield. And you can't charge up the force repulse anymore. I really don't feel like I'm missing on much there, but it's still noteworthy. But I'm being totally honest here. Though I'd still rather use a regular controller, I actually found myself sort of enjoying the motion controls. They at least work here. Yeah, there are a few hiccups here and there, mostly with the nunchuck not registering things, a problem I remember from childhood, but credits due where credits due. The controls work. The C button is basic lightning, but it seems to drain your energy bar faster, even when maxed out. You swing the nunchuck, and you will do the force push. Supposedly, if you do this holding the C button, it will shoot out a force push with lightning, but I didn't get that to work very often. The Z button is used for force grapple. I already said this, but this time it does feel a little more limiting. Before you used the two sticks to move the three axes, but this time you hold up the nunchuck to raise your victim, while the joystick does the rest. My problem is that it would basically let you fling them all over as long as they were in range. When you grab them, you automatically go to the regular height, and when you hold the nunchuck up, it will raise them slightly higher. But what else is that they got rid of the doll physics, so it's just not as interesting anymore. But for what it loses, it gains something. If you swing down the Wiimote while holding them, they will slam into the ground. And as for the move I talked about earlier, you swing the Wiimote and items and enemies nearby will fly towards your target. It's quite entertaining to see. Again, still not as interesting, but it is something. While someone is in your grasp, you can also hold B and swing the Wiimote to throw your lightsaber at them, impaling them just like before. You can do that without holding someone. All you do is hold the trigger B button and swing the Wiimote, but I didn't find myself using it that much because it wasn't as accurate. You fight by swinging your Wiimote, and I have to say, the gestures controls really aren't bad here. I'd say it's a little cumbersome attempting to do actual combos with this thing, assuming you can even do combos in this game. I haven't been able to tell, honestly. Like I stated, this game tries to be more combat oriented, but I still end up using the Force more than physical combat. The 360 version made sure you at least knew what to press to get different combos going. You power all your stuff just like before, except this time you don't unlock saber combos or make Starkiller stronger. Nope, you have to find upgrades hidden in every level to do that. In each stage you will find a holocron, and they look very similar as before, except this time there are 3 kinds instead of 2. There are blue ones that raise your force gauge and also green ones that raise your life gauge. I like these inclusions, but I do wish they gave you some sort of number on these for completion's sake. Not a completionist myself, but I don't know if I maxed out Starkiller's force and life by the time I got through this game twice. The last kind you can find is just like the holocrons in the next gen version, the box ones. They serve a very different purpose this time around. They unlock concept art for this build of the game. viewable at the Rogue Shadow menu before every stage. I'm sure the other team used the character art for this, but most of these seem to be for this particular build. Not gonna lie, I wish more games did this. There's also just generally more here, 201 to be exact, compared to the 115 of the next-gen versions. It's really cool and all, but again, this is one of those, I wish they showed a number of how many of these there are exactly in a stage. Back in the day, I was going for 100% and gave up around 170-ish, because those last 30 were just not having it. It really didn't help. This game had me think it wanted me to play it 3 or 4 times to get every single one of them. Again, this is something the game doesn't tell you at all, but from what I could tell, and I could be wrong here, but it seems like the more you destroy, the more likely you are not only to find, but unlock the ability to find new holocrons. But again, I honestly have no idea. I found just over 180 this time around, and that's going roughly through each and every stage, destroying everything I possibly could find. I assume there's some sort of in-game challenges you have to complete, the game's not specifying, which is sort of irritating. The art is really good though, just throwing that out there. The concept art I feel like is pretty worth it. The costumes are also back, with almost every one of them, with 2 noticeable ones missing. Starkiller's Jedi clothes before sacrificing himself, and of course the hospital garb from Vader's medical ship. All of the costumes you unlock after certain stages. But can we talk about that unlocking order? At first, it seems fine, you unlock them like normal, but then you end up going onto a planet literally raining acid in jungle clothes made for Kashyyyk. Then using survival gear on City in the Clouds where you probably don't need it anymore. This might seem like a small complaint, but my thing is, if you're going to add costumes like this in a game where you unlock costumes every other stage for beating said stage, they either need to A, fit the story, or B, add some sort of benefit for the character. Even if they were extras you could find, that would be fine. This is where I think the 360 version does get it right, because finding the other costumes is a benefit you get as the player. A way to sort of show off that you explored, I guess. Even Jedi Fallen Order does this, despite the clothes on Cal Kestis not changing much except the color. But in this game, it doesn't present itself even as bragging rights that you explored. The costumes are automatically unlocked, and after it made sense for you to have them nonetheless. But anyway, once again, there's even more hidden costumes behind a password. This time it's Grand Moff, and doing so will unlock a ridiculous amount of character costumes. It actually has a good amount of movie characters here. They even had Mara Jade, someone from the EU to my surprise. But there's also a bunch of characters from this game, such as Champa and that Rodian I mentioned earlier. I also love trying to find characters that just don't make sense. Like, I could have sworn this game or the other version had C-3PO, and I just find that so funny. But also, again, I love the fact that you can be a stormtrooper beating the hell out of other stormtroopers. But I did that in the wrong stage this time, so I ended up doing what looks like an awful Star Wars fanfic. Zombie robots versus a dark, lonely, edgy stormtrooper. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't love the fact that you could also be Cleef. Like, isn't this what Jar Jar would look like if he were a Sith Lord? See, Disney? Look how interesting this can be! There are also a bunch of lightsaber hilts you can find throughout a few of the stages. 10 in all. I think most of them are actually from this game, with the rest sort of being like Easter eggs. They don't add anything but aesthetic, but it is a really cool option I find. Once again, you can change the color of your lightsaber, though I'm sure you've noticed by now, last time the different colors came in different styles. But this time around, they're brighter and darker versions of red, blue, green, purple, and yellow. No Darksaber this time though, so that's really disappointing. Thanks for ruining this game. Once again, there's power crystals that give you different abilities. I don't really have much to say about them this time. They're exactly as advertised. They only give strength in certain places. The graphics of this game, oh god, the graphics. To be fair here, this is by far not the worst looking Wii game of all time. But take the stiffness from last time and yank off that knob. Guess I shouldn't have expected too much, but then again, Nintendo had this figured out by now, creating some amazing looking games. But for this time, I often wonder if they were reusing assets from other Star Wars games, but I guess we'll never know for sure. Just saying, these do not look good for today's standards, or at the time for that matter. Since I'm playing on an HD TV with a game that was built for a CRT TV, I did notice during the cutscenes there's this odd, weirdly meshed look to some of the sets and the backgrounds. No, this isn't emulation, this is just playing a Wii game on a Wii U. The replay value all depends on what you missed during your first playthrough. Though I've never thought all 201 holocrons were worth it, it could be to you. Though this game does not have a stage select, which is irritating, so you'll have to at least beat it a second time for completion anyway. The cutscenes are actually pretty awesome in this game. See, they aren't pre-rendered here, so whatever costume you have on during the stage, that's the one you'll have during the cutscene.
Keep the ship cloaked and wait beyond scanner range.
I have a really bad feeling about this.
Then we must be doing something right.
Am I going to see you again?
If I can free the rebels, they'll need extraction. Probably not, no.
I've always found that type of thing cool. It makes things feel more customizable. That is, unless you are any character besides Starkiller. Then they won't play at all. I mean, like I said before, I don't mind it. Otherwise, you're sitting through the cutscene until it decides you can skip it usually. But actually, in this build, it is not a problem here. This game will let you skip by pressing the minus button at any point. I cannot tell you how much of a blessing this is on repeat playthroughs. So all of this has me feeling a bit mixed on the experience. I did feel a little bored just swinging the Wiimote around mindlessly, but at the same time with the added stages, and how these are still pretty long, some of them even rivaling their 360 counterparts, this version tends to feel like the more complete experience, or less rushed, I should say. Maybe it's the lack of a stage select, but on its own, this game is still longer than the next-gen version. This game still has its flaws, but I would say that this version is still worth checking out today. I've been wondering how they get some of these controls to work on a PS2 controller, so I hope to get to that at some point. And oddly enough, as a side note, this version of the game is also for the PSP, so I've really wondered how that works. Unfortunately, I played this game to death before I had a chance to even try out the PSP version. But wherever you can find it, I would say try this one out.
So once again, I have to say that this was my Shadows of the Empire. So wherever you can find it, I'd say try it out. It's not great, but it's still really decent. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to blast that subscribe button and ignite that bell icon to keep up to date for future videos. Leave a comment. Tell me what you thought about this game, and please like this video if you like this, obviously. But I guess that's it for this time. I'll see you next time when I review Star Wars: The Force Unleashed 2 for the 360. See ya. Hey guys, Axelmyth here, coming at you with another video. So the last couple times here, I've looked at both the next gen versions and the Wii version of The Force Unleashed. This has been kind of a little series I've been doing, so I suggest you go watch those after you watch this one. But today, we're looking at Star Wars: The Force Unleashed 2 for the 360. So before we get into it, I just wanted to express that I was not excited to return to this game for the third time, because the game didn't initially impress me. In fact, it disappointed me. And I mean, like, this game, when it came out, was hyped as like the second coming of Christ or something like that. Especially to young Star Wars fans like me at the time. I mean, just look at this trailer.
Death is a natural part of life. Foolishly, you hold to hope for the life you once had. Confused, you have become weak and misguided. Hide not from yourself. Accept the certainty. Confront your fear. That all is lost.
Will I ever see you again?
uncertain your future is, find yourself, you must.
Basically, for copyright and video length reasons, I didn't play all of that. But how could you see what you just saw and not get excited for this?
The draw wasn't just that he had two lightsabers. Everything was supposed to be bigger and better this time around. They even marketed the hell out of the fact that Yoda and Boba Fett was supposed to be in this game. But when I did finally get my hands on this game, it was severely underwhelming. The gameplay was about the same, but faster, so that was okay. The Force grip wasn't as fun to use, and the doll physics I liked so much was gone. They also made it seem like Boba Fett and Yoda would be integral parts of the storytelling. And granted, Boba Fett is utilized more in the story, but it's more like a Stan Lee cameo in a Marvel movie more than anything else. The game had a lot of stuff added to it, like missions where you just fall from the sky, and it seemed like they were trying to make a game that seemed to have more variety than making a game that was more interesting. Another thing that slightly bothered me, maybe a bit more than it should have, they added a motion blur when Starkiller goes faster, and I don't know, back then I just didn't like it. It was kind of a really small complaint I had with the game. But all these ramblings about the game were from a decade ago at this point. How well does this game actually hold up now? That's what we're here to find out today. As I said before, the gameplay is similar to the first. Starkiller seems to swing his lightsabers faster this time around, with more combos to attempt and try out. I'm still no good at any of them, but this time you don't have to unlock them through a sort of leveling system. Now you can only level up Force powers through those means. Much of the Force abilities return from before as well, but you have to unlock them in the story, most of them halfway through a level, which is kind of odd. I guess this was kind of the case in the first game as well, but it seems a little more apparent here, because you're supposed to be, by and large, the same person, someone who's already learned these powers. So it seems a little redundant. This isn't Metroid, right? There's the Force Push, which I didn't find myself using all that much, probably because it doesn't send enemies flying nearly as often as before. It really doesn't do much damage either. Plus, there's enemies in this game who can block all of your Force abilities. We have Force Grapple, which has lost most of the doll physics from before. It's still there, but it feels a little more restricting. But you can also pick up 2 or 3 objects at once, so that's pretty cool. Force Lightning, which is pretty much the same as last time. Not much to comment on, except that it feels a little weaker from the original Force Unleashed for some reason. I could be wrong about that though. The Saber Throw, which I did find myself using more than before, but it's really irritating to wait for your sabers to return to you once a bad guy has blocked your throw. Then, instead of the Force Shield, we have the Jedi Mind Trick this time. This is sort of a welcome addition for the most part. I would say its most usefulness is at the final boss or when there's enemies who block your powers, but it is fun to see stormtroopers turn against their own kind. All of that said, I think I'll jump into the story now. This is a decade-old game, but I'm still gonna put a spoiler warning here so you can continue with caution. So pretty much after the first game, Starkiller starting the rebellion and such, the Alliance is now in shambles, and in cells scattered across the galaxy. Or something like that. That's more important later than now. The game starts on the cloning planet of Kamino, Darth Vader arriving to see the progress of his new apprentice, Starkiller, seemingly alive after his sacrifice from the last game. Vader has this apparent clone go through one more test after getting this far, killing what Starkiller loved most, Juno Eclipse. And try as he might, Starkiller cannot do that.
Yes.
Sensing Vader is about to kill him, Starkiller throws a fit of rage and escapes the training facility. Besides one of those falling down missions that I was talking about earlier, it's here that we are reintroduced to things found in the first game, such as holocrons. Changing things up from the Xbox version, instead taking inspirations from the Wii version, we have different colored holocrons. Blue helps your force gauge grow, green gives you more health, and red is usually a lightsaber crystal, but there is one extra costume in this game that's pretty funny looking. Not a clue where it's from, or what it's even referencing for that matter. We are also introduced to this Force Rage mechanic, a gauge that fills up very slowly the more you kill stormtroopers. It's a pretty powerful move and something you definitely don't want to waste on small groups of enemies. I'd say wait until there's 2-3 of the giant robots, otherwise I rarely use this technique. Most things go down easily enough. After level 1, we are off to the planet Cato Nemoidia, where General Ram Koda is kept hostage. How Starkiller knew his whereabouts is unexplained. I mean, he did track him down in the last game, but that was a few days at most compared to years of hiding. So that's awfully convenient. But anyway, we meet the Baron. Starkiller has a blaster pulled on him, leading us into levels 2, 3, and 4, getting through Cato Nemoidia, and rescuing Koda. Starkiller finally gets to the Roman fighting ring where the general is being held. And we have a Gorog sent on us. This boss battle I remember being challenging as a kid, but all you need to do is keep shocking his face with the Force Lightning and keep dodging his hands. The boss battle leads the two taking down the Baron and the entire battle facility on top of him. They end up free falling, and Koda saves them just in the nick of time with Starkiller's old ship, the Rogue Shadow. This is where we're introduced to the side plot I mentioned earlier. Koda and Starkiller have a bit of a disagreement with their next move. Koda wants to bring Starkiller back to the Rebel Alliance to take his place inside of it and be the symbol of the rebellion he himself started. Whereas Starkiller doesn't want any of that, he just wants to find Juno and run away. Again, not clear what he'll do after he finds her. Guess it could be sort of whatever happens after he finds her happens, but a little less of a narrow-minded plan would be very nice here. Koda pretty much agrees with my statement. Starkiller tries to explain that he is a clone, but Koda assures him that there isn't a way to clone a Jedi. Though that's never explained why. I used to think it was some sort of alien situation where Ripley's DNA was mixed with the alien so they could never reproduce an alien, or Ripley for that matter, but they should be able to, at the very least, make an army of non-force sensitive Starkillers. Probably not what Vader was going for, but there's still that. They end up going to a familiar planet, Dagobah, so Starkiller can have some time to think about what his place is, or something like that. And he ends up finding where Juno is in a vision. Oh yeah, this is where Yoda comes in. Notice how I didn't mention him at first. That's literally Yoda's role in this entire game. He introduces Starkiller to the cave, and then Starkiller leaves. It's nothing. There was actually quite a bit of build-up for him being in this game. But this is literally it. He basically tells Starkiller to do whatever he wants with his destiny, and whatever he thinks is best. There's also the problem that this is barely even a level. It has you walk around and collect like 5 holocrons and walk straight into the cave. Like, why is this here? Wanna know why? Because they advertised it. Starkiller does end up going with the general and giving the rebellion intel on how to attack Kamino. So they find themselves on a rebel cruiser named the Salvation, and lo and behold, it's under attack by Imperials. Starkiller makes his way to the ship's bridge just in time to see Juno get kidnapped by Boba Fett, in which this is pretty much his last appearance. And then you make your way to a reactor and take down this giant spider-looking droid. After that, level 7 is literally you coming back to the bridge to start the descent to Kamino. To be fair here, this stage isn't going through the same stage, but in reverse. You do see some familiar places though, but it does take you on a different route. Though, it still does look very samey. This stage doesn't really have a boss, but it does have this really cool thing where Starkiller powers one of the ship's cannons with his Force Lightning. It's just this wonder to be seen, it's really cool. He makes it back to the bridge, and this is where we start level 8, falling to Kamino. We fall into a familiar spot from level 1. And we start the attack. During this stage, there's some back and forth between Koda and Starkiller. It's mostly Starkiller refusing to help and Koda begging for help, though we end up helping them anyway. Sort of like his goals for the moment is the same as theirs. I've never really cared for that, it just feels out of character for Starkiller. We end up at the cloning chambers and climb up them to face our destiny. Now this game's leveling is actually really weird. Because of the fact that levels 2, 3, and 4 sort of go into each other, then levels 6 and 7 do as well, Lastly, to have this problem is levels 8 and 9. I originally thought there were only like 5 levels in this game, but upon looking at the level select for the first time in my life, it turns out level 9 is nothing but the final boss, which is where we of course fight the Sith Lord himself, Darth Vader. This battle's actually pretty cool. We fight him while also fighting off dysfunctional clones of Starkiller. These things look pretty haunting, but so cool at the same time. Vader also throws insults at us. One of them is,
"You are a failed experiment."
And I distinctly remember as a kid throwing that insult back like, "Yo mama's a clone." Starkiller follows Darth Vader onto this bridge-looking area overlooking Kamino where Juno is being held. Vader threatens to kill her, and if he does not comply or if he fails his missions at all. But Juno doesn't like being the damsel in distress. She grabs one of Starkiller's lightsabers and swings it at Darth Vader. This gets her thrown out the window and she seemingly dies. Now Starkiller is super peeved. We take a few more swings at Vader and push him against the electrocuting towers. And finally we finish him off in the most over-the-top but admittedly awesome way. With Darth Vader captured and the rebels surrounded by you, you are given the choice once again here. Do you kill your master, or do you turn him into the rebels? If you let him live, Vader's arrested, Juno's alive, and you get this decent ending, where Starkiller proclaims to Darth Vader that he is no longer under the Sith's control anymore, and he is free, with Vader's haunting reply,
"As long as she lives, I will always control you."
An almost cliffhanger-ish line if you ask me. As Juno and Starkiller fly away to do who knows what, they are followed by the Slave One, obviously indicating Darth Vader is going to be saved by Boba Fett, as this does take place really close to the original Star Wars movies. I don't know if you could tell, but I am not much a fan of the story, and it all has to do with how out of character Starkiller feels. Especially by the end of the story, they really try to leave it ambiguous whether or not this is the real Starkiller or not. And at first, I thought Darth Vader was in fact lying. But it's quite obvious that this is nothing but a clone of him. I alluded to the fact that he is no longer interested in the rebellion, when he was the one that made it to begin with. Also, Starkiller really liked Juno, but in no way was he this obsessed with her to this degree. It's literally ridiculous. They literally Anakin'd him to an almost insufferable level. The third reason is they literally show you that this is not Starkiller in cinematics that you unlock, which I'll get into later. So my question is, why try to make it ambiguous if you're going to show that he's not the original anyway? The story is no longer about a bad guy with a heart of gold and gets redeemed by the end. It's about an abused guy trying to reconnect with a past that's not even technically his, and being pretty whiny about it too. Literally force-stalking a woman across the galaxy despite there being a literal war going on that his former life started. Like, what even is this story? I wanted to say that they made the stages and then made the story later, but if that were the case, I have no idea why they would make most of these levels lead into each other, and not only make it hard to find a decent place to stop, but also not take the opportunity to go to different planets and see other locations like the first game did. And I haven't even gotten to the other characters yet. Juno Eclipse is literally the princess in another castle, and it doesn't suit her well at all. She didn't have much personality to begin with, but she has even less here. She serves only for the main drive force for Starkiller, and it's just not done well at all. This is Star Wars, not Super Mario. Koda's the only one of the trio to come out pretty much unscathed, meaning he's the only one with his head screwed on straight. Again, Juno has no character, so there's no real comparison to be made here. The only weird thing I found is that he looks totally different than he did in the first game, despite it being the same actor. Just sort of a thing I always thought was kind of weird. It's really just a minor complaint. Then there's Darth Vader. And actually, he's probably one of the coolest parts of the game. But again, one minor complaint, there's this one line.
"She would have never loved you."
Makes me cringe every time. It doesn't sound like something Darth Vader would say, you know? More like something his brother Chad would. Getting back to the last little bit of story we have really quick, if you choose to kill Darth Vader, Starkiller gets stabbed in the back by a mysterious hooded figure. who proceeds to kill Coda and all the rest of his men. It was kind of a shock to find out that this was another clone of Starkiller. But man, why couldn't we have been this guy? Vader tells him to hunt down all the rebel leaders. The Dark Clone takes one last look at Juno, seemingly out of pity, and takes his leave with an escort of TIE fighters. I really wonder where this guy was during the good ending. Like, would that have been part of a potential sequel? Guess we'll never know now. Could have been something a little more poetic, seeing the only two surviving clones of the same guy fight against one another, but I'm getting off track here. The different lightsaber colors are also brought back from the first game. With a fun twist on them, they merge the color crystals with the power crystals. All of the different styles have some sort of perk of choosing them. Like there's a fire one, you use up less force gauge when abusing your powers, and when you eventually find the dark saber, you can incinerate the enemy. Something I do find is bullcrap is that you can't unlock every single lightsaber crystal by finding all of the holocrons in the story, because a good chunk of them are locked behind the challenges. During the story, you unlock challenges you can do from the menu, where I remember why I hate doing these things and why I do not like the beat 'em up genre most of the time. Seriously, look at this. I am literally clicking the button and spacing it out as it's telling me, but the combo disappeared, and now I have to wait to do it again. And that type of thing just kept happening where I couldn't just get it right. In these challenges, there are certain goals to reach to unlock certain things. Getting bronze will award you an extra cinematic to watch, and these things are pretty cool. They're done in some sort of comic book style. They tell the story of the dark clone of Starkiller. You can find these on YouTube if you're interested, but to be fair, if you're better than me at this game, which shouldn't be too hard, it's pretty easy to unlock these things, and they are pretty interesting, but really short. Silver will get you extra costumes to use during replays. Most of them are enemies that you already face in game, so it's pretty much because the assets were already there if anything else. Not really a good silver reward if you ask me, especially with these rather outrageous expectations. I do have a bit more to add to this later though, so put a bookmark on this. Gold will award you a lightsaber crystal. I get you need incentive to do these things, and unlocking the last remaining lightsaber crystals is really a decent one, I'll admit. I may not really like it, but I'll at least admit they're better rewards than the costumes. But again, it's just not worth the outrageous expectations of completing the goals. So I didn't even bother. And then there's Platinum, and Platinum literally does nothing. I am dead serious. And they have more outrageous expectations than Gold. After you complete each ending, you are again awarded with a light side and a dark side costume. For the good ending, you get this experimental Jedi armor. Not sure what this would have been used for, but this still is a really cool look. I'm pretty surprised that I haven't seen many people trying to cosplay this. And the dark clone for the bad ending. Actually, really surprised I haven't seen this guy either. Though, not as iconic as the original Sith Stalker outfit, this still looks really cool. Speaking of the Sith Stalker costume, a sweet feature of this game is that with the save file from The Force Unleashed, you unlock 3 costumes from that game. The OG training uniform, usually associated with the character, the Jedi robes from that good ending, and the before mentioned Sith armor. The 2 of them dependent on whether or not you've beaten the respective endings from the first game. Speaking of costumes, let's talk about them. As I said before, getting a silver medal on every challenge will award you an extra one. But there's also cheat codes you can use to bypass that crap. You can do this for every costume in the game, which I thought was really cool. The costumes aren't half bad either. Unfortunately, there's not as many of them as the first game, but this can also alleviate some of the saber crystal frustration. You can only unlock 2 more of the crystals through this means. Guess they wanted you to feel rewarded or something by actually doing the challenges, but it still really sucks that you can't just throw in cheat codes to unlock this stuff. What I thought was really cool at the time of the game's release was that 5 of them were in this guide of both versions of the game from Walmart. It's actually a pretty decent guide and does give better intel on how to actually beat the challenges. I'm still probably not going to do them, but more power to you. The graphics of this game aren't really that bad either. I'm not lying when I say that this is one of the best looking games I've seen on the 360 ever. And on top of all of that, the graphics have aged really well. The set pieces look really nice. The in-game cutscenes look better and less stiff, and those pre-rendered cutscenes are just the best I have ever seen on the 360. So I do feel like I've changed my tune on this game a bit. I never thought the 360 version was the worst game, definitely lackluster to the first, but ignoring the story, I actually felt like I had a little more fun than The Force Unleashed 1. I think I still like the gameplay in the first more overall, but I gotta say, when I replayed a stage or two and skipped the cutscenes, it just felt more fun. And that's just something I don't feel can be taken away from this game. This was a better experience than I thought it was going to be, and credit is due where credit's due. I really hate ending these reviews on a recommendation, but I'd honestly do just that. Except I would suggest doing it through a more modern way of purchasing, because there's a DLC stage that I know of that I've never gotten to play, so I didn't talk about it. And I can't because the store of the 360 is down forever. But it has always looked so cool to play. If there's one thing to take away from this review, it's maybe don't let a previously bad video game experience stop you from trying it out again. It might surprise you.
But that's enough from me. I want to know what you thought of this game. So comment all that down below and tell me the best moments of this game and the worst moments of this game in your opinion. Next time on this mini-series, we'll be looking at Force Unleashed 2 for the Wii. And I'm actually pretty excited to go back to it, because unlike the 360 version we just looked at, where I played it back in 2014, and my feelings have kind of stayed the same since basically all 3 playthroughs of the game, I actually haven't touched the Wii version since 2010. So until next time, this is Axelmyth, and I will catch y'all next time. Hey guys, Axelmyth here, and today I finally go back to a game. A game so dreaded, even Baby Yoda hides in fear of the mere mention of its name. Star Wars The Force Unleashed 2 for the Wii. So this is a little series I've been doing. I suggest you go check out the other parts, maybe before you check out this one, because I'm mostly going to focus on the changes that this Wii version offers to the 360 version counterpart to The Force Unleashed 2, and I'm mostly going to assume that you have seen the other parts, because I mostly just don't want to repeat myself too often. Although, I'm not going to lie, it would make this video longer.
Unlike the first game where I remembered I played the Wii version first, I don't have the same recollection of this title, but I can tell you the impact it had on me. I remember this game looking so bad, and I'm not even that much of a graphics snob. I like playing things on the Switch and 3DS 90% of the time. Like, the first game didn't look too great on the Wii, but I remember the second game looking like an early GameCube title. I don't remember what the gameplay was like. I would have assumed that was so bad I blocked it out of my mind. But I remember it had a larger focus on motion controls, which wouldn't have been too terrible at the time, except this is primarily a beat-em-up, and it's not exactly fun to do beat-em-up things with motion controls. I just remember it being such a step backward from either 360 and Wii installments of literally any of these titles. And obviously, whenever it was that I played the 360 version, the comparison was instantly in my head. And I remember it being so inferior to the point that left such a bitter taste in my mouth. It was so bad. I haven't touched this game since it came out back in 2011 or 2010 when I first got this game. Not to mention, it was one of the first games I have ever sold off. But for the sake of this review and the series, I have decided to give it another unbiased chance. At least try to be as unbiased as I can and compare it to all of the other versions of these games. I would start off with the stories right now, but unfortunately there just aren't that many changes to the story. There are a few things I like to call cosmetic changes, stuff where it's different but ultimately does nothing to change the story. Unlike, again, the first game where the differences was obvious as night and day, there were only a few noticeable ones this time around. I mean, besides the obvious that every single stage is different, which just happens when you get two differing ports of the same game. In the first stage, instead of standing there like a complete waste of space whilst you run away from your prison, you actually run into Darth Vader 3 separate times during your escape. I really like this difference because I have no idea why Vader lets you escape in the 360 version, and I honestly don't know why I didn't remember this one. For old time's sake, I'm just going to throw this right here. Holocrons again are back, but ironically this game takes inspiration from the 360 version of the first game, with only one type of the Holocron. And it gives you both Force XP and also unlocks concept art if you've collected enough of them. That's pretty cool, I guess. I always kind of like the concept art. But this game also doesn't forget that your health and force abilities need to grow as well, so we have two different types of Bacta tanks for that. Red for health, and blue for force. Also, lightsaber crystals are here as always. Not as many colors, only 8 this time, but hey, I thought it was enough. Still fun to mix and match colors. But the power crystals are back. You know, the ones that give you different stat changes depending on the crystal you choose. It's pretty cool that these are here, but I did kind of like how the other build of this game handled this better, with the different colors having their own powers. This made each color have its own uniqueness and strength. But I can't argue with the accessibility and customization being able to choose your favorite color along with your own playstyle has. Options are always a good thing. And unlike the 360 version, you can also unlock everything by going through the stages. There's no extra time missions in this game, which is sort of a good thing for me because I have no idea how you would do combos with these controls at all. In the second stage, Cato Nemoidia, you unlock an extra ability that allows you to see through certain walls and complete puzzles with them. You can also see certain enemies that turn invisible. You use it with the up button on the D-pad. It's honestly barely worth mentioning, but I felt this was a slight improvement over the 360 game combat-wise. Other than that, they're decent enough puzzles to get through, though nothing terribly exciting or hard. Next major change is that Dagobah is actually more of a stage this time. Yoda plays no bigger part though. Starkiller walks into the cave and sort of like the 360 version is given Jedi clothes, except you actually have Jedi robes in this game. I always like that part of this version more, because this is supposed to be in Starkiller's head, right? The stage is more focused on platforming, as it should be, and it tests you in a very interesting way. Like you have a Starkiller on either side, but they're mirrored, so you want to use the other side as your guide, yet remember that you're not controlling the Starkiller on the right side of the screen, you're controlling the one on the left. It's pretty fun, and I wish this stage was just more of fun puzzles and stuff like that, but alas, it is not. A little bit of a wasted potential there. The biggest difference here, though, is the vision Starkiller has. I failed to mention it, because it wasn't super important to the overall plot like I was shooting for last time, but in the 360 version, part of Starkiller's vision was a bunch of clones tangled up inside the cave and whatnot, obviously a reference to all the failed clones that had come before our main clone-tagonist. But this game takes it a step further. It has some of that, but it also foreshadows both the final boss and the bad ending of this game as well, as all of the clones in this cave look evil. This is oddly enough also where we learn the mind trick in this version, much later than the other edition. Then in the next stage, the Salvation, you still get to fight the giant spider droid, but you have a run with it twice beforehand. The first is a quick time event, something I actually keep forgetting to explain that is in all of these games. The second is sort of a puzzle type deal. You have to put these rings back in order, all the while dodging and defending against projectiles from the droid. Then obviously at the end of the stage, you have the before mentioned fight with it. Somewhere around the spider boss, you get an extra move that's not even in the 360 game at all. It's called Force Rage. This ability breaks the game. Seriously, all you have to do is build up a meter via combat, press the right side of the D-pad with the Wiimote, lock onto the giant robots or whomever you wish, and everything goes down with one blow. This is seriously the best way to take down big enemies without it taking forever. Not that those enemies are very hard to begin with, but it's just an easy cheat. I think this power-up comes a bit too late in the game, probably could have been introduced earlier with the game built around it, or just nixed it from the game in general, but all well, glad to storm through these enemies. One change is to the stage select itself, where there are technically around 18-ish levels instead of the others 10. But this game has shorter levels, but listed in 6 different categories. And half the time you can barely tell you entered another one. You'll think it's just a screen to load a different area, but nope, it's a new stage apparently. Most of the stage design is sort of bland also, nothing very exciting or even pops out to me for that matter. The last really noticeable difference is actually the final battle. Instead of being inside and being forced then outside, it takes place outside totally this time. Darth Vader himself has 3 phases. Phase 1 is just a standard fight. Phase 2, and Darth Vader starts throwing your clone brethren at you. Which, in this version, you don't get extra HP from killing them, so they're more annoying this time around. Phase 3 is much the same, but with one more QuickTime event to end the game. My strategy is once again use the Starkiller clones to fuel your Force Rage, and then make sure you target the Dark Lord himself. He doesn't go down in one hit, but he sure doesn't take much damage any other way. And of course you get the 2 standard different endings, with 2 different types of costume unlocks at the end. The Jedi armor and the Dark Apprentice stuff. That all is good. Except, there are no extra costumes in this game. I know I previously complained that they weren't all that good unlockables for doing those extra bonus missions, but I didn't mean get rid of them entirely. I think what would have worked for this game is having more holocrons and those having extra costumes or something. It's better than not having them at all. It seriously damages the replay value of this game for me. You don't even get the 3 costumes for beating both endings in The Force Unleashed 1 for the Wii. Which, by the way, is the only reason I played the Wii version for these reviews to begin with. But anyway, the story is the same, so I don't really have much to add there. I did question why it was so bad, and I got an answer the same day I uploaded my review for the 360 game. By this guy. So I actually recommend you check out his video, it's actually really informative. Link in the description below. And how I wish Disney would open their eyes and just make Force Unleashed 3. With the recent Switch release, I feel like the world is ready. But something I will comment on is that these cutscenes really do look so awful. I'd have rather had the in-game stuff from game number 1. It sounds a bit mean when I say it like that, but these cutscenes just look so uncanny anyway. Since they had a different version of this game to pull from with the same cutscenes with little to no dialogue, I feel there really just isn't an excuse at all. Whereas if they had used in-game cutscenes, it would have at least had a reason to look unnatural. Which wouldn't have been too terrible anyway, because unlike my memory, this game actually looks better than the first game. But this does leave me with a burning question. One that has haunted me for generations and driven me insane for all of these years. Why didn't they just use the next gen cutscenes? The gameplay is a bit different from all the games up to this point, having only a slight more focus on motion controls, and yet not really either. You press the A button to start swinging your sabers instead of the normal swing you used to do. It's sort of weird that they let you press a button for regular attacks this time around, and the benefit to this is that there's this new meter on top of the screen, and it basically fills if you're able to keep wailing on stormtroopers and such. But by doing this, it also gives you more experience points for your force upgrades. Shaking the Wiimote when you have the combo meter filled up will unleash your super moves. Not sure what's so special about them, so I don't have anything to say about them, except it's sort of a useless addition, at least for normal mode. To deflect laser bolts, you tilt the Wiimote sideways. I never understood why they make you do that. It may be more realistic, but you can never time it just right so the bolts fly right back to their faces. And the developers knew this, because it's literally a thing you can level up to make more accurate. Honestly, I do not care how you do the force powers in this game whatsoever. Like, I guess there's nothing inherently wrong with it, except its motion controls with the nunchuck, and it's always been more finicky than the Wiimote. You press the Z button and shake the nunchuck, and you'll use Force Lightning. I actually found myself using this a lot, and feeling like a jerk the entire way. Swing the nunchuck by itself to do a force push. I usually do this for a surprise attack, not that these enemies focus on surroundings or anything, but it sends them flying and leaves them open for a follow-up attack. Then to throw your lightsabers, you hold the Z button and then swing the Wiimote. I didn't find myself using this a lot because when I did, it hardly worked unless there was an actual reason, say like a sign or something. Then hold the C button to grab things with the Force. And actually, I don't have a giant problem with this one. Mostly. This very much feels like the next-gen version of The Force Unleashed 2. You have a pointer from the Wiimote to lock onto your desired targets, which is a bit too slow to harness very well, but still works well enough. But the biggest problem with this ability this time is locking onto things after you already have somebody in your grasps. You can throw stormtroopers at each other, and even then it's sort of lucky when you do, but you can't throw them at objects around you. But you can still throw objects at them. Supposedly, if you shake the Wiimote while they're in your grasp, you'll throw your lightsabers at them like normal. But I couldn't get that to work much either. You can also move them around the screen with the before-mentioned pointer. It makes the objects easier to stack this time around for the Wii. Not the best version of the grapple, but not the worst like I once thought. In a surprising turn of events, this game uses all sides of the D-pad. I think its use would have been better for the camera, but whatever. On the left side is the Jedi mind trick. It works much the same as before. Use it to turn your enemies against each other. Pretty handy with a bunch of enemies, but really easy in the chaos to kill your pseudo ally. On top we have the before mentioned Force Vision. On the bottom, there's the Force Dash. Very useful for when you want to go a short distance very fast, much like rolling in The Legend of Zelda. Lastly, there's the Force Rage on the right side, and I've already kind of gone into how that works. Unfortunately, after the story, there's not much to do. Even the cheats are a little disappointing. They are only really power-ups that you unlock by achieving certain objectives, like collecting all the holocrons and defeating Unleashed mode. There is a multiplayer mode that I haven't had anybody to play this game with, so I don't know if it's worth it. So, trying this game out again really opened my eyes to what is here, and not in memory. It's not nearly as bad as I used to think it was. Despite some minor gripes, there's nothing wrong with this game. It's just disappointing, especially comparing to its other brothers and sisters. The gameplay I felt was too mundane and only mildly entertaining, and nothing really stood out compared to the rest in this experience. Plus, unlike even the 360 version of this game, there's very little replay value here, and there just wasn't much in that counterpart anyway, so that's telling. I wish there was more here, and more I could appreciate, but there's just not. It felt like a very bland experience to me, but not necessarily totally awful like I used to think. I am still glad I came back to this title. It harkens back to what I said in the last review. Don't let a previously bad gaming experience stop you from trying it out again, especially when it's been years since you last played it.
If you've liked this video, please blast that like button and ignite that bell icon. I have some more review videos in store for you, so please click the bell icon to stay up to date for those. And until next time, this has been Axelmyth, and I will catch you all later.